Ties between Jerusalem and Stockholm are in focus. Israel's Foreign Minister Eli Cohen meeting with his Swedish counterpart Tobias Billström in the Swedish capital. It's the first such visit by Israel's top diplomat in 22 years. A number of Swedish political parties have called for the country's embassy to be moved to Jerusalem, and its parliament unanimously passed a measure urging the government to label the Iranian Revolutionary Guards a terrorist organization. So for more insight, our senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman is here in studio. So this meeting in Sweden focusing on what is being called positive change in terms of relations. How so?
Right. And what's important, I think, to emphasize, Mita, is it's not just about Sweden. A lot of the factors at play here are also relevant for Israel's relations in Europe writ large. So I think that's why this item is important for us to pay attention to because of the wider frame. But yes, Eli Cohen, the first Israeli foreign minister to go to Sweden in 22 years. Benita, this was a country that had long been considered one of the most critical in Europe towards Israel. And obviously a lot of water under that bridge. The Israeli government at one point pulling its ambassador after Sweden recognized a Palestinian state in 2014. Not the only episode over the course of a number of decades. Also attacks on the Jewish community in Malmo, with anti-Semitism there having risen because of the immigrant population there. But again, turning point in Sweden's relationship with Israel in the last few years. First, a new government in Israel, the Bennett-Lapid government, more comfortable for Stockholm to deal with. And so we had the Swedish foreign minister making contact, calling Foreign Minister Yair Lapid, again, a kind of a breakthrough in the relationship. And then elections in Sweden last year that brought to power a minority government with support from the outside, from the far right, that is a more center-right government. And again, a government that may, for that reason, if you look at the way European politics are organized, may be more inclined toward Israel. But of course, it's not just about Sweden's domestic politics, although it is that. It's also the geopolitical situation, the war in Ukraine, right, that has focused so many minds.
And efforts to join NATO obviously linked to that.
That's right. The Israeli Foreign Ministry makes much about Sweden being on the cusp of joining NATO. We will see. That has much more to do, of course, with what happens in 2 weeks in Turkey than it does in Sweden. Of course, the Turks and the Erdogan government being the ones who have held up Sweden's membership. But whether or not Sweden joins NATO, Sweden is going to need to have a bigger military, whether it needs to meet the NATO requirement or presumably to be defending itself on its own. One would imagine that they will be out shopping for weapons, and of course that would play to Israel's advantage, given Israel's advantage in that sphere. So obviously the Ukraine war, also domestic politics in Sweden, the presence of an large Iranian community in Sweden, which has worked to Israel's favor because these are Iranian exiles who don't like the regime. And you talked in Benita in your lead about the vote in the Swedish parliament to have the Revolutionary Guard Corps named a terrorist organization to push the European Union to do that. At any rate, a lot of these trends we see playing across Europe, the impact of the Ukraine war in some cases on potential in relations with Israel, and the importance of domestic elections and how they matter. Again, important for Israel's friends or foes abroad, not to paint Europe with a broad brush, not to paint individual countries with a broad brush. Trends can change. We've seen it not only in Sweden, we've seen it, of course, in Cyprus and in other parts of Europe. So again, thing that Israelis, I think, can rightly celebrate, and I think the foreign ministry also can rightly celebrate. The foreign minister in Sweden for the first time in 22 years.
Always fascinating seeing the dynamics and the changes in relationships across the political spectrum and the international spectrum as well. Senior diplomatic correspondent Owen Alterman on top of all those latest developments. Thank you as always.